Fresa, Chapter 1.
It was on that very day that the 4 long, difficult years of high school finally came to an end. Dressed in a fitted navy blazer and skirt, on a beautiful, sunny June day, I went to collect my high school diploma. On the way, I met my best friend, Natalie, my companion through all the hardships of school, thanks to whom I managed to survive the toughest moments. Natalie appeared smiling and radiant. Dressed formally, she looked stunning. Although I never had serious insecurities, I always envied my Natalie a little. Her personality and her looks. Not only was she a beautiful, slender blonde with blue eyes, but she also had an incredible energy about her, a positive aura surrounding her, an undefined, captivating, and hypnotic inner beauty. Each of us was completely different, yet we understood each other without words and felt perfectly comfortable in each other's company. The atmosphere that day was truly special for me. It was morning, the temperature was rising with every minute, and nature was waking from its sleep. The people on the street, still sleepy and lost in thought, hurried forward, staring blankly ahead. Natalie and I, quite the opposite, were in no rush at all, savoring every moment. We felt free. On one hand, the exhausting daily grind was finally over. On the other, the prospect of university still felt so distant that it didn't matter yet. That feeling of freedom and happiness was a moment that became forever engraved in my memory. The graduation ceremony went by surprisingly quickly. Flowers, teachers, wishes, emotions, and sighs. I didn't even have time to take in the atmosphere of the moment before it was already over. Good moments last only a fraction of a second, while the bad ones, an eternity. After leaving the school, some people said their quick goodbyes, then each went their own way. It made me sad because I felt that I would probably never see them again. A small group of us decided to go and savor our newfound adulthood and freedom at a nearby bar. The temperature had risen quite a bit, and a cold fruit drink with a colorful straw was the perfect choice. Together with Natalie and a few other friends, we sat reminiscing about the 4 years we had spent together. After an hour, people slowly began to leave, and my cheerful mood gradually faded. I realized that a certain chapter of my life was coming to an end. I felt the same sadness as before at the thought that the people I was now saying goodbye to, those who had been with me for so long and with whom I had shared so much, I might never see again. Only a few people were left. The conversation turned to plans for the future. Besides talking about university, careers, and work, we began discussing our plans for the summer holidays. I hadn't thought about it at all before and had no idea how I would fill such a long stretch of time. Natalie looked at me with a questioning expression. I guessed she wanted to know if I had any ideas for the holidays. I could only shrug in response. Up until then, I had been focused entirely on my final exams. I hadn't had the time or energy to think about what would come next. Having no idea what to do with my summer break, I listened carefully to what the others had to say. The plans were varied. Some wanted to work to earn money for university. Others were going abroad to see the world. Still others planned to lie on the beach, doing nothing. As for me, with no idea of my own and hoping that everyone's answers might give me some inspiration, I turned my gaze to a classmate I didn't particularly like, the one who still hadn't shared her plans. And you? What are you planning to do?
I'm going to Spain to pick strawberries.
It was clear that she was embarrassed about it and was going more out of necessity than choice. The others didn't react much. The attention quickly drifted, and the conversation moved on to other topics. For some reason, though, it sparked my curiosity, and I wanted to ask for more details. Unfortunately, Natalie interrupted me, trying to pull me away for another drink. Wanting to keep my classmate in place and learn a bit more about her trip to Spain, I asked, "Alice, would you like something to drink?" Seeing that she hadn't ordered anything before, I added, "It's on me." She seemed surprised by the gesture, as if she wasn't used to such kindness, but she thanked me and, standing up, said,
Unfortunately, I have to go now. I need to get to the bus stop and head home.
It was clear that she felt uncomfortable around our classmates and wanted to get away as quickly as possible. I don't know why, maybe it was the alcohol, but I suddenly felt sorry for her. She looked incredibly sad among all those smiling, chatty faces. On impulse, I sent Natalie off to get another drink and said to Alice in a tone that allowed no argument, "I'm walking you to the bus stop. In return, you'll tell me a bit about your trip." Natalie, without asking anything, simply went to the bar. When Alice and I stepped outside, she was tense and quiet. I had to draw every word out of her. I had the feeling she was afraid I would judge, criticize, or mock her. We talked for about 15 minutes, but I didn't really learn anything concrete. I decided there was no point in pressing further, but out of politeness, I exchanged phone numbers with Alice for the future. I smiled to myself, thinking how strange it was that, after all these years, I had never even had her number. The bus was due to arrive any minute, and I wasn't quite sure how to end our meeting. A bit spontaneously and a bit out of need, as if I wanted to make up for all the years of distance, or perhaps to ease my own conscience, I said to Alice, "You know, this might actually be the last time we see each other. Thank you for the time we spent together at school. And even though we didn't have a close relationship, I'm really glad we were in the same class. I'm also sorry for everything, if I ever said or did anything hurtful to you. Take care and good luck." At the end, I gave her a tight hug and kissed her on the cheek. I saw that Alice stood there, surprised and speechless, not knowing how to react. She hadn't expected such a goodbye. I noticed the bus approaching the stop, but without waiting for Alice to recover or say anything, I turned around and headed back to the bar. Natalie and I barely finished our third drink when people slowly began to get ready to leave. The cheerful atmosphere started to fade into something more somber. Though tired, Natalie and I weren't ready to end the day just yet, but the only thing left for us was to take a slow, unsteady walk home together. I don't remember how I ended up in my bed, but after such an exhausting day and in such a good mood, I quickly fell asleep. In the morning, I was awakened by the sound of my phone. I must have received a message, but I didn't have the energy to get up and see from whom. I started stretching lazily. It was already past 10 o'clock, and the sun was shining brightly through the window. Yesterday must have tired me out a lot, since I had slept so long. It was the first day of my well-deserved summer holidays, so I felt no guilt about lounging around. I finally got out of bed, but the house was already empty. It was quiet and still. My parents had long since left for work. After yesterday's exciting day, the silence seemed even heavier than usual. I felt a sense of unease creeping in. What am I supposed to do now? What about the holidays? University? Life? I thought. I don't have any concrete plan at all. On one hand, my mind felt blank. On the other, thoughts raced uncontrollably. I turned on the TV and the radio at the same time, just to drive away the silence and drown out my thoughts. Fortunately, my parents had gone shopping yesterday, so I could focus on preparing a delicious breakfast for myself. Leisurely, I savored my meal just to fill the time. Approaching 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I realized that I should probably do something so the day wouldn't just slip away entirely. Then I remembered that someone had messaged or called me. I had been so sleepy that I had completely forgotten about it. I picked up my phone and saw that Alice had written to me. She apologized for being so cold to me yesterday and said she felt bad about it. She wrote that I could call if I had any questions about the holidays and that she would answer everything if she could. I thought it might be better if we talked in person over coffee. Natalie wasn't home today anyway, as she had to go somewhere with her parents, and I felt like getting out of the house. I dialed the number, and after a moment, Alice answered. "Yes? Hello?" she said, her voice full of surprise. "Hi, Alice. I just read your message and wanted to ask if you'd like to meet up. We could go for coffee and talk about the holidays or anything you feel like." Alice went quiet for a moment, then tried to dodge the meeting, asking, "Why? Why would we?" "I can tell you everything over the phone," and similar excuses. I realized she didn't really want to meet, but I didn't have any other plans for the day, so I tolerated her excuses and managed to convince her to go out. I cleaned up after breakfast, took a long, relaxing shower, put on a summer dress, quickly did my makeup, and went to meet Alice. I spotted her from a distance and studied her for a moment. She walked hesitantly, head down, arms folded around herself, her gaze fixed on the ground, her expression dull and scared. It was a sad sight, seeing a young girl with so little life in her. Alice had a mysterious and intriguing beauty. Her large, dark eyes and shiny black hair harmonized perfectly with her pretty, dark-skinned face. She was slender, short, and delicate in build. Looking into her black eyes, I felt a slight unease and fear. Yet, at the same time, I was curious whether behind those eyes, it was really as frightening as it seemed. I greeted her with a broad smile and gave her a warm hug. Her face immediately seemed to come to life and gain expression. We sat outside at one of the little cafes and ordered iced coffee. It was difficult for me to talk with Alice. I had to pull every bit of information out of her about the holidays and keep the conversation going the whole time. I thought that I had to draw something out of her somehow, to get to know her better and see what was really going on inside her. I started asking more personal questions about her family, her plans for the future, whether she had any interests. I was trying to find some common ground. But the more I probed, the more I felt that the wall Alice had built around herself was only getting thicker, and it was becoming harder and harder to break through it. The coffee was finished, and I could feel our meeting was coming to an end as well. I decided I had nothing to lose and might as well lay my cards on the table. I don't know if you feel the same way, but our conversation just isn't flowing today. I was thinking that maybe we could go on vacation together, but it seems like you don't really like me and don't want me to come with you. I don't quite understand why. I've never done anything bad to you. My words clearly struck a chord with Alice. She suddenly became cold and distant. She replied with obvious irritation. Throughout all of school, you treated me like I didn't exist. You didn't even say hello to me. You looked at me with pity and contempt. I don't understand why you suddenly want to be friends with me now. I can only assume you have some sort of ulterior motive. Thank you for the invitation, the coffee, and the meeting, but it's time for me to go. I was speechless. That was not the response I had expected. Before I could gather my thoughts and say anything, Alice had already walked away and disappeared around the corner. I ordered myself another coffee to calm down and collect my thoughts. I began reflecting on Alice and how I had treated her over the years we spent together in high school. Maybe I had been distant and hadn't paid her much attention, but I always felt that she didn't like me and wasn't looking for contact. It made me sad that our acquaintance had ended this way. I paid for the coffee and decided to walk home. The afternoon sun was so pleasant that it was hard to refuse myself such a stroll. Getting home took a while and left me quite tired. I had dinner with my parents, chatting about everything and nothing, then washed up and went to bed. I pulled the blanket over myself and was slowly drifting into sleep when the phone lying beside me rang and woke me up. With tired eyes, I saw that I had received a message from Alice. "Are you still awake?" she wrote. Should I reply or ignore it? I hesitated for a moment, but answered that I wasn't asleep. I was curious what Alice would say next. I was afraid she wanted to bring something up again, something she'd forgotten to mention earlier. She didn't write back. Instead, to my surprise, she called. When I picked up, Alice, in a shy and trembling voice, began by apologizing for her behavior during our meeting earlier that day. I could tell she felt guilty. She awkwardly tried to explain it away with family problems and recent stress. I was tired and didn't really understand what she was trying to tell me. I managed to say that it was all right, although deep down I felt disappointed by how she had treated me. I had reached out to her, and she had accused me of things that weren't true. Alice noticed that I was sleepy and, not wanting to keep me up, said that if I was still interested, she would gladly go to Spain with me. She added that she'd call me in the morning to tell me all the details about the trip. She said goodbye and hung up. I didn't know what to think. I pulled the blanket over myself and went to sleep. In the morning, I woke up groggy and worn out from thinking about Alice. I had breakfast, took a quick shower, and decided to call her myself just to get the conversation over with. I was tired of all this back and forth. I asked short, direct questions, and Alice answered in the same brief way. In the end, I told her I needed to think over what she'd told me and would let her know whether I was going. There wasn't much time to decide or prepare, only a week. Alice apologized once again for her behavior the day before, but I brushed it off, told her it was fine, said goodbye, and hung up. The next day, luckily, I was able to meet with Natalie and soak up some positive energy. We went for a long walk in the park. I told her the whole story about Alice, and eventually our conversation drifted toward the trip to Spain. I told Natalie that I didn't know why, but I felt like I should go. I started trying to persuade her to come with me, though it wasn't easy to find good arguments. Natalie's parents were well-off lawyers, strict and decisive people. I was sure they'd think that manual labor for modest pay was a poor use of their daughter's time. Natalie herself preferred sightseeing or relaxing rather than doing physical work. I kept persuading her and finally convinced her by saying that if we didn't like it or it turned out to be too hard, we could just quit and travel around Spain instead. From what I had learned from Alice, there were no required working hours. The pay depended on how much fruit you picked. Natalie and I planned out our trip and came up with backup options. All that was left was to talk to our parents and Alice. My parents agreed right away, especially after hearing that I'd be going with Natalie. She had a tougher time convincing hers, but eventually they gave in too, probably only because we were going together and they knew my parents well. I also called Alice to tell her that I was going and, to her surprise, that Natalie would be joining us. She wasn't thrilled. I could sense she didn't really like Natalie. I had to reassure her that the three of us would have more fun together. I promised her that no matter what happened, we'd stick together, the three of us. Alice agreed, though without much enthusiasm. In just a few days, we took care of all the paperwork with the agency that was organizing the job. Then came the shopping, packing, and final preparations. The week passed quickly, and before we knew it, the day of departure had arrived. Early in the morning, Natalie and I arrived at the bus station with our parents. We loaded our luggage into the compartment, said our goodbyes, and boarded the bus. I saved a seat for Alice in the row in front of us so she could sit nearby, but she still hadn't shown up. I was about to call her to check if she had overslept when I suddenly spotted her emerging from the crowd. In her usual way, with her head down and a small bag slung over her shoulder, she hurried onto the bus. I called out to her and pointed to the seat I'd saved for her. She smiled, something she rarely did, and sat by the window. I was relieved when we finally started moving. The emotions had become exhausting. The constant worrying, wondering if I'd forgotten something, the stress of the unknown, the nervous energy coming from our parents, it all wore me out. The driver started the engine, and at last we were on our way. As I waved goodbye to my parents, I realized that Alice hadn't had anyone there to see her off. I decided not to ask why. I placed my hand gently on her shoulder and asked if everything was okay, and if she was excited about the trip. She smiled and admitted she was nervous, but said she appreciated not being alone. Our spirits were high, but if only we had known how long and exhausting that journey would be, I'm not sure we would have been quite so cheerful.
That's the end of the first chapter. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next.